Richard Blackwood's fingers drummed against the polished mahogany of his desk, each tap echoing through the cavernous penthouse office. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan sprawled beneath him like a personal kingdom. 52 stories of power and isolation. At 42, his empire of sustainable technology investments had made him a fortune. But as the evening shadows stretched across his pristine floors, emptiness gnawed at him. He glanced at the framed Forbes cover featuring his carefully composed smile, wondering when he'd last genuinely felt anything resembling happiness. The doorbell chimed, interrupting his thoughts. His new housekeeper had arrived. The fourth this year. He sighed, straightening his tailored jacket before opening the door. "Mr. Blackwood," she said with a slight bow of her head. "I'm Eleanor Mitchell. I'm here to begin work." Something in her eyes, warm brown with flecks of amber, caught him off guard. Not the usual deference of household staff, but something deeper, more dignified. Her clothes were modest, but impeccably neat. Her posture straight despite obvious exhaustion. "Come in," he said, holding the door wider than necessary, suddenly aware of the excessive space of his home. As she followed him through the marble entrance hall, he noticed how she studied everything with quiet attention, taking mental notes without judgment. In those first days, Eleanor moved like a gentle current through his home, present yet unobtrusive. Rooms transformed in her wake, windows gleamed, fresh flowers appeared in forgotten corners, meals materialized with surprising thoughtfulness. Unlike previous staff who lingered for overtime pay, Eleanor departed precisely at 6 each evening, declining additional hours regardless of the generous compensation offered. "Previous commitments," was all she would say, her tone polite but firm. Richard found himself increasingly curious about this woman who navigated his world with such quiet dignity. Sometimes he'd catch her gazing at the city below, a profound weariness briefly visible before she noticed his presence and resumed her composed demeanor. His routine began to shift, working from home when she cleaned his office, asking her preference for lunch when they would eat at the same time. Small moments of connection that felt strangely significant. Yet every evening at 6, Eleanor would gather her few belongings and disappear into the elevator. Her life beyond his walls, a complete mystery. One Thursday evening, watching her hurried departure, Richard made an impulsive decision that would shatter the carefully constructed walls between their worlds. The next evening, Richard waited in his Aston Martin, engine purring quietly as Eleanor emerged from his building. He followed her at a careful distance, feeling both ridiculous and intrusive. The sleek vehicle seemed grotesquely out of place as they traveled deeper into Brooklyn, leaving behind the manicured neighborhoods for streets that grew increasingly narrow and worn. Eleanor transferred from subway to bus with practiced efficiency, her movements becoming more hurried as daylight faded. When she finally stepped onto a street lined with dilapidated row houses, Richard parked and followed on foot, maintaining a discreet distance. She approached a faded green door, fumbled with keys, and disappeared inside. Richard hesitated, conflicted about this invasion of privacy, when the door suddenly flew open again. "Tommy! Lily! I'm home!" Eleanor's voice carried a warmth he'd never heard before, and 2 small children burst from the house, launching themselves into her arms. The transformation was immediate, her face illuminated with love as she knelt to embrace them, laughing as they spoke over each other in their excitement. Richard retreated into the shadows of a nearby stoop, transfixed by this revelation. Through the uncurtained window, he watched as Eleanor moved through a cramped apartment that could fit inside his dining room. She prepared a modest meal, helping the children with homework, her movements now animated and full of life. Later, she tucked them into a shared bed, taking her place on what appeared to be a fold-out couch. In the harsh light of a bare bulb, Richard saw the deep circles under her eyes, the way she massaged her reddened hands. The weight of his witness pressed against his chest, making it difficult to breathe. If you are enjoying the story, type "Ib" in the comments and subscribe for more videos like this. If not, type 0. It helps me create even better content for you. Continuing. The foundation of Richard's world tilted dangerously as he drove home that night. His penthouse, once a symbol of success, now felt obscenely empty, a museum of acquisitions rather than a home. Eleanor's dual existence haunted him, her professional restraint in his home versus the vibrant warmth she showed those children. Sleep evaded him as questions multiplied. Were they her children? Why was she living in such conditions? The contrast between their lives, his excess and her evident struggle, made him deeply uncomfortable. The next morning, Eleanor arrived, precisely on time, showing no sign of her exhausting evening routine. Richard, bleary-eyed from his sleepless night, found himself watching her with new awareness. "Eleanor," he began, attempting casual conversation while she organized his kitchen. "Have you worked as a housekeeper long?" She glanced up, surprise flickering across her features at this personal inquiry. "About 3 years now," she answered carefully, "since circumstances changed." "You're very skilled," he offered. "Where did you learn?" A shadow passed over her. "Your face." "Necessity is an excellent teacher, Mr. Blackwood." Before he could respond, she added, "I've prepared your schedule for today. The charity gala is at 7. Your suit has been pressed." The professional barrier reasserted itself, leaving Richard frustrated by the distance he had unwittingly maintained all these months. Over the following weeks, Richard orchestrated subtle changes. He increased Eleanor's salary without explanation and adjusted her hours to end at 5 instead of 6. He left excess groceries for her to take home. Fresh produce, quality meats, children's snacks. She accepted these changes with quiet gratitude and growing suspicion. Their interactions gained a new layer of complexity, her wariness meeting his tentative attempts at kindness. One afternoon, Richard returned early to find Eleanor rapidly wiping away tears while dusting family photographs she assumed he never noticed. The sight struck him with unexpected force. He approached slowly, offering his handkerchief. "My mother," he explained, gesturing to the elegant woman in the silver frame. "She passed when I was 12. Eleanor accepted the handkerchief with evident surprise. "I'm sorry for your loss," she said softly. "It's difficult, isn't it? Children shouldn't have to navigate the world without their mothers." The personal nature of her response hung between them, an inadvertent revelation. Richard seized the opportunity. "Are those your children, the ones you rush home to each evening?" Eleanor froze, her professional mask slipping momentarily. "How?" "I followed you," he admitted, shame coloring his voice. "I shouldn't have. I was curious where you went every evening. I apologize for the invasion of privacy." Anger, fear, and resignation passed across her face in rapid succession. "They're my sister's children," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "Tommy and Lily. My sister died in a car accident 3 years ago. I'm all they have now." "What would you do if you discovered that the person working for you was secretly raising orphaned children? Would you offer to help or mind your own business? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The revelation of Eleanor's circumstances created an unlikely bridge between their worlds. As her story unfolded over cautious conversations, Richard learned that Eleanor had abandoned her nursing studies to care for her sister's children when Janet was killed by a hit-and-run driver. The culprit had never been identified. Insurance. Money quickly depleted amidst medical bills and funeral costs, forcing Eleanor to take multiple jobs. "They've already lost their mother," she explained one evening as she prepared to leave. "I couldn't bear for them to lose their home too, or be separated in foster care." Richard listened, struck by her matter-of-fact recounting of circumstances that would have broken most people. The more he learned, the more he recognized the extraordinary strength beneath her quiet exterior. Without explicitly acknowledging it, their relationship shifted. Richard began arriving home earlier, sometimes helping with dinner preparations while asking about her day. Eleanor gradually relaxed her professional guard, revealing glimpses of the woman behind the housekeeper, her dry wit, her dreams deferred, her fierce dedication to giving Tommy and Lily stability. One rainy Friday, Richard made an unprecedented request. "I'd like to meet them, Tommy and Lily, if that wouldn't be an imposition." Eleanor studied him with uncertainty. Why? The directness of her question demanded equal honesty. "Because they matter to you," he answered simply, "and I'd like to understand your life beyond these walls." After a long moment, she nodded. "Sunday afternoon. We usually go to the park if weather permits." She wrote her address on a notepad, her handwriting neat despite her trembling fingers. 2 o'clock. The modest neighborhood park bore little resemblance to the manicured green spaces of Richard's world. Equipment showed signs of wear, graffiti, decorated concrete surfaces, but children's laughter filled the air with universal joy. Richard spotted Eleanor immediately, seated on a bench watching 2 children on the swings. He approached with uncharacteristic nervousness, a bag of carefully selected books clutched in one hand. "Mr. Blackwood," Eleanor acknowledged as he reached. Them, her formality, a reminder of boundaries still in place. "Please, it's Richard here," he insisted gently. The children regarded him with open curiosity as Eleanor made introductions. 10-year-old Tommy, serious and protective, shook Richard's hand with surprising firmness. 8-year-old Lily, with her mother's eyes and her aunt's quiet dignity, smiled shyly. Initial awkwardness dissolved as Richard produced the books. Adventure. Stories for Tommy, illustrated science volumes for Lily, chosen based on details Eleanor had inadvertently shared. "Eleanor mentioned you're interested in becoming an astronaut," he told Lily, whose eyes widened at this evidence that her aunt spoke about her. "This one shows actual photographs from the International Space Station." The afternoon unfolded with unexpected ease. Richard pushed swings, listened to elaborate stories about school projects, and watched Eleanor transform into the person he'd glimpsed through the window. Relaxed, animated, her laugh uninhibited. As they walked them home, Tommy slipped his small hand into Richard's with casual trust. Something profound shifted in Richard's chest, a tightening, followed by an expansion that left him breathless. The memory of that afternoon became a turning point. Richard found himself increasingly drawn to Eleanor's world, the cramped apartment filled with more love than his spacious penthouse had ever known, the children who approached life with resilience and wonder despite their loss. He began joining them regularly, Sunday afternoons in the park, weeknight dinners at their kitchen table, helping with homework while Eleanor prepared meals. Each visit revealed new dimensions of Eleanor herself, her patience when teaching Tommy fractions, her creativity in stretching limited resources, her fierce advocacy when dealing with school administrators. Richard's own life began to feel oddly bifurcated, his corporate existence increasingly hollow compared to evenings spent playing board games by lamplight. One night after the children were asleep, Eleanor confronted him over mugs of tea at her scratched kitchen table. "I don't understand what you want from us," she said quietly. "You have your own world, Richard, one with influence and opportunities. I can only imagine for Tommy and Lily. Why spend your free time in this apartment?" The directness of her question demanded honesty. "Because I've never felt at home anywhere the way I feel here," he admitted. "My world has everything money can buy and nothing that truly matters." Their eyes held in the dim light, mutual understanding deepening into something neither was prepared to name. Who was the hit-and-run driver who killed Eleanor's sister? Is there more to this tragic story that connects these two unlikely worlds? The answer will shock you. The corporate charity gala felt suffocating after months of evenings in Eleanor's modest home. Richard moved mechanically through practiced social interactions, his thoughts elsewhere, until a conversation at the bar jolted him back to awareness. "Shame about that settlement last year," a board member was saying, lowering his voice. "Hamilton was one of our best, but accidents happen. At least the company contained the damage." Richard turned slowly. "What settlement?" The man glanced around before continuing. "That hit and run in Brooklyn, woman with 2 kids. Hamilton was drunk, panicked, kept driving. Legal handled it. Minimal payout, sealed records. Nobody connected him to the company." The glass nearly slipped from Richard's fingers as devastating clarity washed over him. Janet Mitchell, Eleanor's sister, killed by his own company's executive. A death he had unknowingly helped cover up with corporate funds. Bile rose in his throat as he excused himself, stumbling toward the exit. Outside in the cool night air, Richard faced the sickening truth. His company had stolen Eleanor's sister, orchestrated a cover-up, and left 3 lives shattered. And Eleanor, unaware of the connection, cleaned his home, trusted him with her. The family opened her heart. The betrayal, though unintentional on his part, felt overwhelming. He had to tell her, but doing so would destroy the fragile happiness they'd built together. Either choice promised devastation. 2 days passed while Richard gathered evidence and grappled with his conscience. Corporate files revealed the full extent of the cover-up. Hamilton's intoxication, the decision to flee, the systematic burial of evidence, the pittance offered in settlement without admitting culpability. On the 3rd morning, he asked Eleanor to join him in his office before beginning her duties. She entered with visible concern, noticing his haggard appearance. "Is everything all right?" she asked, still standing near the door. Richard gestured to the chair across from him. "Please sit, Eleanor. There's something I need to tell you." His voice cracked as he began the impossible explanation, watching recognition and horror dawn gradually on her face. 3 years ago, an executive from my company killed a woman in Brooklyn while driving drunk. He fled the scene. The company, my company, covered it up. Eleanor's face drained of color. "That woman was Janet Mitchell, your sister." The silence that followed felt endless. Eleanor sat perfectly still, her breathing shallow, eyes fixed on him with devastating comprehension. "You knew," she whispered, finally. "All this time?" "No," he interrupted desperately. "I only discovered it 2 days ago, but I should have known. I should have questioned the legal settlements crossing my desk. My ignorance doesn't excuse my responsibility." When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely audible. "I've been working for the people who protected my sister's killer." The stark truth hung between them, insurmountable. Eleanor rose without another word and walked out of his penthouse. Richard didn't try to stop her. In the deafening silence that followed, he made the hardest phone call of his life, to his company's board, announcing his intention to expose the cover-up, fire Hamilton, and offer the Mitchell family proper restitution, regardless of personal consequences. His legal team warned of catastrophic damage to the company's reputation and his own fortune. Richard found he no longer cared. The next weeks passed in a blur of legal proceedings and media scrutiny. Hamilton was arrested and charged. The company's stock plummeted as details emerged. Richard testified openly about corporate negligence, accepting his share of responsibility for a culture that valued profit over human life. Through it all, Eleanor remained unreachable. He sent letters to her apartment explaining everything, offering assistance for the children while respecting her need for distance. They returned unopened. The hollowness in his chest expanded daily. He moved through necessary actions, corporate restructuring, settlement negotiations, press conferences, like a man underwater, everything muffled and distant. The only clarity came in his determination to secure justice for Janet Mitchell and financial security for her children, even if Eleanor never spoke to him again. One evening, as autumn rain lashed against his windows, the penthouse intercom buzzed unexpectedly. "Mr. Blackwood," his doorman announced, "Eleanor Mitchell is here to see you." Richard froze, heart hammering against his ribs, before managing to say, "Send her up, please." Have you ever had to forgive someone who deeply hurt you or someone you love? Is true forgiveness possible after devastating betrayal? Share your experience in the comments. Eleanor stood in his doorway, rain-damp and resolute. Behind her stood Tommy and Lily, solemn-faced and holding small backpacks. "May we come in?" she asked formally. Richard stepped back wordlessly, afraid to hope, afraid to speak. Once inside, Eleanor turned to the children. "Why don't you explore the apartment while I talk with Mr. Blackwood?" They nodded, moving cautiously into the vast space with wide eyes. Eleanor faced Richard directly, her posture straight, her gaze unwavering. "I've spent weeks being angry," she began. "At you, at your company, at everything your world represents." Richard nodded, accepting this. "Then I realized something. My anger wasn't changing anything. Not for Tommy and Lily, not for Janet, not even for me." She took a deep breath. "What you did, exposing the truth, accepting responsibility, that was changing things." "It was the only right choice," Richard said quietly. "Too late, but still necessary." "Yes," Eleanor agreed, "too late, but necessary." She glanced toward the children, now examining his telescope by the window. "They ask about you every day. Despite everything, you became important to them." The implication that he had become important to her as well remained unspoken but palpable. "I don't expect forgiveness," Richard said carefully. "I just want to make things right, however possible." Eleanor studied him thoughtfully. "Forgiveness isn't immediate, Richard. It's a process. I'm still angry, still hurt. But I'm willing to try. For them, for myself, for the future rather than the past." She held out her hand, a gesture of immense courage. "We can start there. What would happen if someone who has everything suddenly loses it all? Would they discover that true wealth lies elsewhere? The answer will astound you." Richard's resignation as CEO shocked the business world but felt like liberation. The settlement with the Mitchell family represented a significant portion of his personal fortune, but seeing it secured in trusts for Tommy and Lily's education and future needs made it the most satisfying financial transaction of his career. The media eventually tired of the story, allowing healing to begin. Rebuilding trust with Eleanor proceeded in small, significant moments. Cups of coffee shared at her kitchen table, honest conversations after the children were asleep, gradual relaxation of the guardedness in her eyes. They established new patterns around the children, whose resilience continually amazed Richard. Tommy taught him to repair the temperamental bathroom sink. Lily insisted he attend her science fair. Both children incorporated him into their lives, with straightforward acceptance that humbled him. 6 months after their reconnection, Richard proposed a solution to Eleanor's crowded living situation. "I've purchased a brownstone in Park Slope," he explained, spreading photographs across her kitchen table. 4 bedrooms, small garden, good school district. There's an apartment on the ground floor with a separate entrance. I could live there while you and the children take the main house." He rushed on before she could respond. "You'd have complete independence. I'm not presuming anything. I just want to be nearby, to help with the children, to—" He trailed off, uncertain how to express everything in his heart. Eleanor touched the photographs gently. "You've changed your entire life for us," she observed quietly. "Why?" The question demanded absolute honesty. "Because you showed me what matters," he answered simply. "What a real home feels like, what family means." Their eyes met, mutual understanding deepening into something neither could deny any longer. Eleanor covered his hand with hers, the touch conveying what words couldn't yet express. "We'll think about it," she promised. Her smile held the warmth of possibility. The brownstone renovation became a shared project that summer, Richard's vision merging with Eleanor's practical wisdom. Tommy helped select paint colors with surprising artistic insight. Lily designed her own reading nook with meticulous drawings. Eleanor watched Richard interact with contractors, negotiating fair wages with respect rather than intimidation, and felt the last barriers around her heart begin to dissolve. One evening, as they sat on paint-spattered drop-cloths, eating takeout after the children were asleep, Eleanor finally asked the question that had lingered between them. "Do you regret it, giving up your company, your penthouse, half your fortune?" Richard considered this seriously. "I regret the circumstances that brought us here, Janet's death, the cover-up, my ignorance. But this—" He gestured to their surroundings, to the home taking shape around them. "I've never been more certain of anything." His gaze held hers steadily. "I was dying in that penthouse, Eleanor, surrounded by things, isolated from life. You and the children saved me from that fate." Eleanor set aside her container, moving closer until their shoulders touched. "We're building something real here, aren't we? Something beyond conventional definitions." Richard nodded, heart accelerating at her proximity. "If you're willing," he said softly. Eleanor's answer came without words, her fingers interlacing with his, her head resting against his shoulder, a quiet sigh of acceptance. Above them, stars appeared beyond the uncurtained windows, witnesses to a moment of profound transformation. On moving day, Richard watched as Eleanor directed the careful placement of worn furniture among new pieces, creating a home that honored both their pasts while embracing their shared future. Tommy and Lily explored every corner of the brownstone with exuberant energy, claiming spaces, testing acoustics, plotting adventures. Something profound settled in Richard's chest as he observed this domestic choreography, a sense of rightness, of homecoming, of belonging. Later that evening, after celebratory pizza and ice cream, after bedtime stories and goodnight hugs, Eleanor joined him on the garden bench beneath a canopy of string lights. "Happy?" he asked softly. She nodded, leaning against him comfortably. "It feels impossible sometimes, finding happiness after such loss, like betraying Janet somehow." Richard understood this complexity. "I think perhaps the greatest honor to Janet is raising her children with joy, showing them how to move forward while carrying her memory." Eleanor's eyes glistened in the gentle light. "When did you become so wise?" she asked, half teasing. "When I met you," he answered simply. The honesty between them had become their greatest strength, the ability to speak truth, to acknowledge pain, to celebrate healing. Eleanor turned to face him fully. "I've been thinking about your ground floor apartment," she began carefully. Richard waited, heart suspended. "It seems rather unnecessary, don't you think? This house has plenty of room for all four of us, together." The significance of her words hung in the night air. "Eleanor," he whispered, her name a question and answer combined. "Are you certain?" Her smile held the confidence of absolute clarity. "Some journeys begin in the strangest ways," she said, touching his face gently. "But it's where they lead that matters." The Christmas wedding surprised no one who had witnessed their journey. In the community center, decorated with simple elegance, Tommy stood proudly as best man, while Lily scattered rose petals with scientific precision. Eleanor wore a cream dress that complemented her natural beauty, carrying wildflowers and her sister's favorite ribbons. Richard waited at the altar, humbled by the second chance at life he'd been granted. When the minister asked who gave this, "Woman," Tommy stepped forward with Lily's hand in his. "We do," they answered together, their young voices strong with certainty. As vows were exchanged, promises of respect, partnership, and boundless love, Richard marveled at the path that had led him here. From hollow success to authentic happiness, from isolation to family, from a life of having everything to discovering what everything truly meant. Later, during their first dance, Eleanor whispered against his shoulder, "Janet would have liked you, you know." Richard held her closer, honored by this highest praise. "I would have liked her too," he replied softly. "She raised amazing children and had a remarkable sister." Around them, friends and neighbors celebrated. Tommy demonstrated dubious dance moves, and Lily explained the scientific principles of cake construction to patient listeners. This, Richard realized, was wealth beyond measure, a family forged, through tragedy and redemption, stronger for the journey that had brought them together. As midnight approached, they gathered on the brownstone's rooftop terrace, the four of them wrapped in blankets against the winter chill. Above them, stars punctuated the darkness with ancient light. "Make a wish," Lily instructed, as a shooting star blazed momentarily across the heavens. Richard closed his eyes briefly, then opened them to gaze at his family, Eleanor's head resting against his shoulder, Tommy's gangly arm around Lily's small shoulders, their faces illuminated by starlight and unconditional love. "No need," he said softly. "Everything I could wish for is already here." Congratulations. Type 9 in the comments so that I know you stayed until the end with me. Thank you for watching, and until tomorrow's story on this same channel.